Coming to you from a Sony Field recorder, this is the 10th anniversary show of Don't Get Me Started. This is a conversation about advertising. And here is your host, former Russian translator and current Creative Circus copywriting student, Maria Khodorkovsky.
All right, folks, welcome to the Dan on Dan show, the 250th episode, where we have the head of our advertising department and purveyor of stern but loving creative advice, Dan Balser. So Dan has been at the circus for about 13 years now, but prior to that has been all over the ad world in New York, Ogilvy and Mather, Anderson and Lemke, Publicis, and has been at the circus for 13 years now.
That's about right.
Yeah?
That's about right. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So then let's jump right in there. What led you to leave the ad world, so to speak, and join the circus, become a teacher, and kind of take root here?
Yeah, well, so first of all, thank you for doing this for me, so I can just sit back and not have to pay attention to this podcast. So I'm sitting here walking around thinking about, this must be what guests go through. Like, who wants to listen to me? Like, I know that my voice has been prevalent on this thing for 10 years, and obviously people are tuning in to listen to the guests, but I'm hoping that people are going to be interested in these stories, and I hope that I'm not repeating any of the stories, because it seems like it's almost impossible not to cover familiar ground in 10 years of conversations. But I know that I've talked about this. I think it was probably 8 years into my time in New York, which would have been actually well over a decade into my time in advertising, because I worked in advertising for 3 years before I went to ad school. Mm-hmm. So that's 5 years. By the time I graduated from ad school, I'd already been in advertising for 5 years. So by the time I'd been in New York for 8, that was 13 years in the business already. And I remember saying to someone, I don't know if it was my partner or a friend, just that I said, I know I'm not going to be doing this forever. I just knew I wasn't going to stay in an ad agency. And I didn't know what that meant, but I knew that there was something about it that wasn't completely fulfilling to me.
Have you been able to pinpoint by this point what that was?
I think so. I also talk about this, and okay, so full disclosure, I'm sure I'll be radically oversharing a lot of personal things on this in this conversation, but one of those things is that, at a certain point when you're a young adult, you have to assess why you're happy or not happy. And I started seeing a therapist, I don't know, when I was in New York for a couple of years, and she had asked me a question about when was I the happiest. Mm-hmm. And I started thinking about why I was the happiest when I was the happiest up to that point. And it boils down to not an arrogance and a big ego, but needing to have my ego fed to feel relevant on a day-to-day basis. Right. And I think when you're in a big agency, or even when you're working in advertising sometimes, you don't know whether the things you do are affecting anything at all. And I think that was a function of kind of working in a big machine in New York, where I kind of felt like if I didn't come to work tomorrow, really wouldn't make that big a difference. Someone else would pull the slack, or there'd be a senior team that wouldn't even be presenting our work anyway. And it just kind of wasn't fulfilling to me. And there's something about the teaching that has such immediate feedback. There's such immediate sort of like validation of relevance. And, when I started teaching, when I moved to Atlanta and started teaching, I was 38 years old. I mean, it wasn't like I was like planning on changing my career forever. It just kind of seemed like something fun to do.
So like you thought about it as temporary?
I don't know if I thought about it. I mean, to a fault. I mean, I never really planned like, okay, this is what I'm going to do now. I think that it was just very rewarding in sort of a very immediate way. And I think I've always been analytical and intellectual about advertising. So I think I've always kind of looked at it from an angle of context and relevance in business, and the creative process as part of it. And I think that I've always been curious about the craft more than the business part of it anyway. Mm-hmm. So I think that there's something about being in a school and being amongst the sort of the ideation and idea generation phase of the process that's really the most fun anyway. So why not just do that all the time? It's just basically like going to a dessert restaurant for dinner and ordering dessert all the time.
So it was a pretty easy transition for you? Or were there some things that you missed from like the fast-paced New York ad world?
I think it was very easy. I think that it was it was a lifestyle decision. In some ways, it was difficult because I missed the money I was making. I mean, it was considerable cut to do this. So I had to hustle a lot to augment my income with a lot of freelance. And the good thing about that was there were still people in New York that would throw me bones, work stuff for a long time. So that was the hardest adjustment. The hardest adjustment is being a freelancer is just the hustle that you have to work to find work just as much as you're working, which is kind of shitty.
Yeah. The life of the freelancer.
Yeah, it's kind of hard.
Yeah. But so in the context of teaching, what's easiest for you and what's hardest or most unpleasant?
Okay, that's an interesting question. So in teaching, what's the easiest and what's the hardest? I think the easiest part of it is identifying the good ideas, understanding why things are working and why things aren't working. I think that's just a natural thing. I think that just comes from experience and from sort of innately internalizing a strategic thought. And is this executing a strategy? So that to me is not difficult. And it's not difficult to give feedback. It's not difficult to push the better ideas. The hardest part to me is this notion that creativity can be taught and that somebody can come to a school like the Creative Circus and develop creativity, and that there's some sort of formula, code, or key to becoming something. And I don't buy it. I mean, this is arguable. I mean, you can have a conversation, you can get philosophical about this with people that believe everybody's creative and everybody can find that thing. I think people maybe are creative, but I don't think that means they can be an art director or a copywriter. I don't think that just because you have a good eye or that you have taste or that you love telling jokes that you are cut out to be a professional, someone in professional communication arts. I don't think that everybody can do this. And I think that it gets frustrating for me when a student will say, well, what do I need to do? And tell me what to do. And we had this, Jen Majo is a co-teacher of mine with the grad class. And this happened to us relatively recently where we were looking at work from a student and one of us made a comment and the student says, well, what should I do? Should I take that part out? So I should just take that part out. Say, why don't you make your own decision? That's the hardest part about this is that at some point, and I know I've had this conversation with Lisa, my wife, about, well, that's what they're here for. They need to learn. They want instruction, but at the same time, we're supposed to just be handing the baton. By the time you get to the second year of this program, you should be making all of your own decisions. You should be learning how to make decisions. You should be learning and developing your own taste to make your own decisions. So the hardest part for me is the students who need to almost be carried across the finish line. And I don't know if it's because they shouldn't be doing this or because they don't realize the amount of work they're supposed to be putting in.
So that kind of segues into a question I have here from Namwan Lavelle, upcoming third quarter copywriter, about that feedback that we get so often that, I like this. I can see how it would work for somebody else. It's not doing it for me. So is there any advice or kind of steps to take to get better at distinguishing between something that works but not for everyone versus something that just kind of sucks?
That's a great question. And that's a perfectly appropriate question for someone who's in the second quarter of an 8-quarter program. And I appreciate Namwan's thoughtfulness. So I can imagine that would be difficult because I tend to recall myself saying sometimes, I don't like this, but it works. And I think that, does that mean if he doesn't like it since he's the instructor, does that mean it's bad? So I can see how that's difficult. I think that at some point you have to say, okay, we're both watching TV together. We both see a commercial and I can like it and you can dislike it. Doesn't mean that it's not an effective ad or that it's not a great commercial.
Just means that people are different.
I just don't like it. I just don't like, talking products. I just don't think it's good. It doesn't mean that it's not, really effective or smart or creative. So I think that goes back to what I was saying a second ago is that you have to develop your own taste and say, because I try really hard as a teacher, and anyone who's like a creative director or a teacher, I think it's really important to be able to separate objectivity from subjectivity, to say, okay, this isn't really meeting the brief, this isn't really good, or this is derivative of something I've seen, which are all objective feedback, versus very subjective stuff. I don't like Green, I don't like this actor, I don't like this because it wasn't funny to me. And I think that those are the kind of things that a creative should ignore. I think if a creative director says it, I think you have to listen to it because they're paying you and you're at work. If a teacher or a peer says, I don't like it, but you like it, say, well, what? Ask the question, like, you don't like what it's saying, or you don't like how I'm saying it? If you don't like how I'm saying it, tough shit, I'm saying it that way. And I think that's hard for a second quarter student to separate the difference between the teacher doesn't like it and the teacher doesn't think it works. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, and that actually, this is a question that I've been thinking about and goes back a little bit to what you mentioned was hardest for you. We talk about creativity a lot, about you can't teach creativity, about the creative process, but is there room for analysis and strategy, and that being paramount and having the creativity almost secondary to coming up with like this solid, psychologically potent ad?
I think what I was trying to say was you can't make someone creative. I think you can teach creativity in some aspects. I think you can teach process. You can teach tricks to like try to liberate your own creativity. I don't think you can make someone creative, but I think you can say, okay, here's some sort of concepting starters, metaphors, exaggeration, time shifting, a world without, a world with everybody has this. These sort of creative tropes that you can kind of dig into and then try to liberate the way you're approaching a problem. But what was your question more specifically?
So when I first got interested in copywriting, right, I had a slightly different idea of what it was.
What was your idea?
That it was all about like drilling down really deep into human psychology, understanding why we want the things we want, are afraid of the things we're afraid of, hope for the things we hope for, and then channel that into creating an effective ad. So when I got here, I realized it was a lot more about the execution and about creativity, broadly speaking. So I guess the question was, can that be the focus in teaching and in being a successful advertiser?
Which the former or the latter?
The analysis and psychology part over the kind of whimsical creative execution.
Well, I think you're talking about two different stages of the process. I think you really have to understand the psychology and the hopes and fears of your target. I think that this is cliched, but advertising is a conversation, meaning that the brand has to understand who's consuming the message. So, it's so much easier with the leverage of that insight. It's almost like having a tool to open things up. I think that the most ineffective work is the stuff that's really about a product versus a benefit. I think that you're probably at an advantage if you're thinking of it the way you're thinking of it. I think that the two-pronged sort of pieces of a portfolio, though, you have to have the thinking and then you have to be able to write and you have to be able to execute afterwards. And it's another frustration as a teacher is that I think a lot of students, or I should say young creatives, believe that once they have that idea, they're kind of done in a way. And I see a lot of times in class, I'll see work that's presented that doesn't really change between the class presentation and the end of quarter panel, meaning they haven't gone back and set aside time to rewrite and rephrase and reapproach their solution. I mean,
are you saying that's necessary?
I think it's really important.
Okay.
Right. I think it's really unlikely that you've written the best version of the thought the first time.
That makes sense. All right. A little bit of a thornier question. Advertising is so dependent on talent and skill. So even at school, do you find it hard not to play favorites and to kind of single out like, oh, this kid's got it, and then pay equal attention to everybody? Or do you have your techniques for giving everybody attention?
I mean, I gravitate towards the good ones. I mean, I think that's human nature. I think that it's very stimulating and fulfilling to be in the room with intelligence and original thinking. So I think that as a human being, it's very difficult not to be mentally attracted to those who are good at this. Having said that, all of these little plants grow at their own rate, and you never really know who's going to be good. And here's another weird thing too, going back to sort of my ego. It's like I can make a much bigger difference with people who aren't obviously really good. I'm just kind of along for the ride with the talented ones. I actually don't like to take any credit for when the really good ones do really well. And they say stuff, we couldn't have done this without you. It's like, you would have done this pretty well without me. You didn't really need me at all. I think that, the students that we have here are pretty smart, pretty aware. And I think that I'm not doing this for self-preservation, but I don't play favorites because it's so obvious. It would be so obvious if I'm doing that. And I welcome anyone who feels that I have to let me know, because there was a group once where I became good friends with a subset of this quarter, and the rest of them called these people Dan's friends, and I don't like that, because I don't like to think that, because I know how it is as a child who had parents that, like, it's a zero-sum game. So like if he likes that person, then that means he doesn't like me. And that's, first of all, that's total bullshit. But I know that that's how it can feel. It's like, he's not acting like that with me. And I remember one time saying this in a class, saying, I was praising someone for what they were doing. And I turned to another classmate and I said, by the way, just because I'm saying that doesn't mean that I feel the opposite to you. Because I know that that's how it was being internalized. Like, we didn't say that kind of stuff. It's like, that doesn't mean... Specifically
that person.
That person.
Okay.
And it hit a nerve because it was so true. And playing favorites... This is one thing that's interesting too, being my age with this much experience. This is a much longer career than you think it is. Meaning things evolve, things change. Today's favorite, is irrelevant 10 years down the road, and 10 years down the road gets here real quick.
Right. Well, that segues perfectly into kind of a similar question. Have you had students that did not so stellar at the circus and then went on to do great things? Absolutely. So essentially, like, what is the relationship between being really impressive at school and having a really impressive career? Yeah,
I think it's very loose. I think that the superstars are obvious, right? The ones that are really, really, really good tend not to surprise you very much. They get out and they do really well. But there's a very different rhythm and almost a radically different set of skills required to succeed in the industry. And sometimes they don't really show up in school. And a lot of times in schools, the person is less mature. The person is less focused, or they're right out of college and they're still in school. And more times than you can count, there are people that get out and do really, really, really well. And I want to say it's surprising, but how many times has it happened before you can keep saying it's surprising? It's not really that surprising. There have been people who have admitted that they weren't great in school and gone out and done great things. There was a guy that my wife and I were classmates with who we didn't know how the school kept letting him back. And he's had just a really, really, really good career. So one thing that's kind of unrealistic, and this is for anyone who's at the circus or at an ad school, is that the ad schools, we have an extremely high expectation of the level of work that has to be in these portfolios. You have no constraints. You need to be doing work that could win awards if it were real. And it's all about having a better idea and stuff that's just awesome. And it's very intense and very sort of competitive in a healthy way. The industry, you're almost a little bit overqualified. When you get out in the industry, you'll find that people who didn't always have the best idea can still be consistent and reliable and professional and the kind of creative that a creative director can lean on for a Friday night deadline. There's a whole set of values that they're not sort of deprioritized in school. They're just not relevant in school. You don't have the responsibility of making a creative director look good. You don't have clients who need things tomorrow at school. But the people that kind of are wired to be laborers or soldiers, they get out and they're more valuable in a lot of ways than the ones that are kind of naturally funny, great creatives. So you'll see a different set of traits that are valued in the real world.
That's so interesting. So the standards are higher because the constraints are lower here.
The standards on the actual work are way higher. I would say this. They're not just way higher. They're the main thing.
Right.
Right. I wouldn't say that when you get out, you're going to have creative directors that are okay with subpar work. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is when you get out, there's an additional shelf on the bookshelf of traits that are required for you to be successful that weren't there in school. And a lot of that is about resilience and reliability and professionalism and patience and collaboration and all these other things that aren't as important in school.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. And along those lines, so one of the things, the patience, the resilience, there's hard work. We talk about that a lot. That's highly touted. Obviously, I'm not knocking it. But is it possible to have a quote unquote normal life and work normal hours in this industry, still do well, still see your family and friends and have your hobbies and like be an advertising professional like that?
This is my opinion.
Of course.
I think eventually. I don't think as a junior that you should be thinking about, life balance or that kind of thing. And the reason I think that it's unrealistic as a junior is because, and I didn't know this when I got out, I wasn't as good as I thought I was. I think that I had good ideas, but I think that you have to sift through more stone to find diamonds as a young person. And I think that you have to be present to give the impression of dependability. I think there's a lot of sort of paying into the system that happened as a young person. If you're always at your desk, then you've made yourself indispensable. You've made yourself valuable. Mm-hmm. You've made yourself a really good value for that agency. You're not going to get fired because you're the one that they need. You also, might take 3 days to come up with an idea that the senior guy could come up with in half a day. Because you just haven't been doing it that long.
But you need to be there those 3 days working on it.
Most of the people I know, my generation, are much more efficient, much more intelligent about this stuff, knowing right away what's not going to work, whether it's because they understand the client sensibility or they understand sort of the depth and relevance of an idea. And they also, people my generation, will leave the office at 5, go be with their family, and get back online after dinner. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that's awesome, because it's not awesome. But
the jumping online after dinner part, or the leaving at 5 part?
The jumping online after dinner part, just for our lives, is not wonderful. But I think that the longer you do this, the better you are at kind of getting a sense of what's working and what's not working. And I've heard that repeatedly. I've had this conversation with a lot of senior people.
So you earn your work-life balance.
I think you earn it because you develop the skill to do it better. I don't think you earn it because you put the years in so you can go home now. I think you've got the work done so you can go home now. Another thing is I couldn't fucking do shit before 9:30 when I was in my 20s. And now it's like by the time 9:30 comes around, I've gotten most of my stuff done. I'm up. Here's the little full disclosure. I got to be out of my bed. I have to have my feet on the floor every day at 6:50 a.m. Doesn't matter what time I go to bed. It used to be like when you're younger, right? If you're up late, it's like, I'm just going to sleep in the morning.
Right.
Fuck that. I've got to get my son to school. So at that point, I get back. I'm back at home after driving him to school at 7:51, something like that. So I've got like an hour and a half. I can get all my emails, everything done before I even do my yoga, get in the shower, and come to work. So it's sort of just a different approach to life but I think when you're young, I think that don't expect to have that. And here's let me tell you, let me just say this. I'm sure I've said this on the podcast. There's only one, I wish someone had told me this too. There's only one point of working hard.
And that is?
To give yourself options. Right? So you're not doing the work because you have to prove to someone that you're hardworking. You have to do the work so that you can eventually get a better job, or so that you can eventually have one more good idea to present. And I think that if you shift it to be a little bit selfish like that, I think it makes the, I guess it's my own personal hang up. It kind of makes me not think that I'm kind of treading up a hill against sort of external validation. Mm-hmm. So it's really for yourself to do that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And you see that too. It's like when you're passionate about it, it's like the people that I know here at school who are amazing, they're putting in the hours. They're certainly not complaining about it. Mills Adams graduated last quarter. It's like, I think he just like never slept and he just loved it. He just did it because he loved it. So whatever.
Yeah. Why do people jump around so much, especially in the beginning, from job to job when they graduate? So it's like 6 months here, a year there, which is not the case in every industry.
Yeah. I think that, I don't know. It depends on the answer. It depends on the person. I know that for me, I really only switched job once in 10 years in New York. I only switched jobs one time. It was completely for my portfolio. I didn't do it for money. I didn't do it for any reason other than the fact that I wanted to do a certain type of work and it required a move. I think that advertising, generally speaking, you are doing the next job up for the pay of the job down. In other words, you're hired as a junior, but you're acting like a copywriter, or you're hired as a copywriter, but you're really doing the job of a senior copywriter. You're always, for the first 8 years of your career, you're going to be underpaid. And then all of a sudden it sort of flips and you're slightly overpaid. And that's when you need to watch your back for layoffs. So in other words, you go to work and you're a value. You're hired because they can get something out of you without paying a lot for it. And you're proving that you can do that job. So you have to prove you can do it by doing the next job up. So you're really making like what, 40, 50,000, but you're really doing the job of a $65,000, $70,000 person. They're not going to pay you that. They're going to give you the 5% raise every year. They're not going to jump you up unless you are critical for winning a huge piece of business, but someone else will. So you make that move to get that title, you get that money. And people do that for either for money or for opportunity. Mm-hmm. I would caution against moving for money. I would say you should always move for opportunity. But I think that's why people move. And another thing is, good and bad, you don't know what a place is going to be till you're there. So you might say, I don't want to work there. I've heard it's blah, 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 blah. But you could go there and it's not like that at all. Right. On the other hand, you could go somewhere you think it's going to be great and you realize, you know what, it's not that great. All of those things happen, and all of those things are reasons people move.
God, to be honest, it sounds pretty terrifying as somebody who's like in the beginning steps of the education part.
Yeah, I just would not think about the money. Don't think about the money. When you get to a job, think about whether it's a place that you can learn, grow, and be part of something. And the money, I'm telling you, the money will come. Because when I talk about being overpaid, that's from making moves and from all that kind of stuff. And at that point, this is one thing you should never lose sight of, even seniors, is making yourself indispensable. I think that's a mistake people make. People get laid off because it's a better decision for the company to cut that salary than to keep you there. Mm-hmm. So that
because somebody else can do it, or they can go without anybody doing it. Mm-hmm. Right.
Well, for the amounts of money that you're talking about for ACDs, they can usually hire a couple of junior teams.
Yeah.
A couple of junior teams.
And overwork them and underpay them and get the job done.
Well, maybe, or like perfectly appropriately work them, but you have 4 people for the price of 1.
Right. Right. All right. Well, okay. In terms of the bigger things that keep people going and keep them passionate. So if creatives have certain causes that they care for and want to champion, first of all, is that possible to do as an advertising professional? And if so, what are the best ways to do it so that you're not just constantly selling product A and then product B and then product C, but actually kind of championing the things that you care about?
Right. I don't know, other than saying that why wouldn't you just do it on the side? You know what I mean? I think that there's so much opportunity now to create real things that don't rely on agency or rely on permission. But I think the industry is trying to figure that out. Mm-hmm. I think people are still trying to figure out how can we, and I know brands are open to it and agencies are open to saying we need to be more than just pushing products. And I think it depends, if you're a junior starting off, I think it depends on the philosophy of the agency from the top down. How much do they value that? Because I think a lot of people give it sort of lip service and a lot of people actually do care. I mean, Droga 5 created Tap Project. These are things that they've done over the years because they, from the top down, care about using their powers for good. Mm-hmm. So I don't think everyone does. I think everyone thinks they should. It's sort of like clients that say, we need a Facebook page. It's like, why? Because you've heard that's what people are doing. And I think there's a lot of companies that are doing that when it comes to causes.
So it's just that there has to be a reason for it. It has to be a legitimate thing rather than, I've heard this is what's being done.
I think that the agency has to buy into it. I think they're not going to put resources on it and make it real or good unless they think there's a real value for it, either in the world or for themselves. So it depends on where you're working. I mean, send me an email. Let me know if you disagree. I'm curious.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then on the flip side, what if you get a client that you just completely disagree with on philosophical grounds? You think they're harmful. You think they're screwing people over. Can you say no?
I think you can once. My partner wouldn't work on cigarette brands at Ogilvy. We had a cigarette brand. He wouldn't work on it. I think I know for a fact they respected that. It wasn't a problem for them. I think I wouldn't make a habit of cherry picking, sort of like, I don't want to work on this because I know that the CEO of this client, supports this political whatever. I think that just gives the agency one more reason for you to be frustrating. I think if you have personal reasons you don't want to work on a cigarette brand because you believe that they're selling poison, that's different.
So yeah, I guess it is personal, but there are so many companies out there that either do shady things or can have these detrimental effects on the environment or on consumers. But so what once is respected,
I don't know.
Twice is...
I don't know. If you're at a big agency, I wouldn't keep saying no, but I will say that that's a super legitimate question on an interview, to say, where does this agency stand on how do you decide what clients you take? I don't think there's anything wrong with asking an agency in an interview, how do you decide who you do work for?
That's super useful.
I mean, I've heard a lot of creative directors say we say no to things that we don't believe in their companies, and I think you're finding the industry. I think people need to sleep at night. I think people are waking up to that's a stupid analogy. People are waking up to sort of like that the work that we do does affect things.
Yeah. There's power there.
There's a legitimate.
You got to be careful.
I think if I were hiring you and you asked that question, I would have the utmost respect for that.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, kind of to take it back to you, any advice stemming from your experiences as a junior creative, your life, your work, that you would want to convey to us or convey to like young Dan?
All right, so I'll tell this story because it was probably one of the biggest mistakes I ever made. So I think one of the hard adjustments is becoming your own career manager, right? Always having that rudder about why are you making decisions to take this job, to work on this project, to do this thing. So I want to say this was sometime around 98, something like that. And we were expecting our first child, and I started having these dreams, right? I started having these dreams about, first of all, losing my own personal space, that the baby was going to take over my space, and I had to give up my desk and all this stuff. But I was also starting to think, like, I need to step up. I need to be a man. I need to make more money. Mm-hmm. And I was at a good job, and I started kind of looking around at maybe moving. I heard from a headhunter about a job at another agency, and I'm not going to give any of the names. And I got this job offer, and it was for considerably more money than I was making. So I went back to my agency, and I said, look, I've got this offer. I need more money, which was bullshit, first of all. I just want you to know, like, just for the record, like, what the hell was I talking about? And the agency was like, well, we'll give you a big bonus. Like, they offered me like a $25,000 check to stay. And I was like, nope, that's not salary. I'm leaving. And I moved. It was so horrible. I hadn't met the creative director. The partner I was working with was crazy. The accounts weren't great. I go to this agency and I'm like, oh my God, I couldn't even get in to meet the creative director to show work. I remember I'd done a holiday card for the agency that I thought was great. I mean, I would have put it in my book, and it just got killed without a comment. And I was like, oh my God, I'm in like the absolute wrong place. And I was like, what the hell did I do? And so I called the old agency back. It was Ngati Thomas Hedge. I called back Tony Ngati. I said, look, I don't know if you guys have filled my job yet. I don't know if you guys have filled my job yet, but things aren't working out.
That must have been a fun call to make.
He was like, well, let me see what I can do. I'll talk to the account guy, blah, 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 account team. And it turned out they had not replaced me, and they had a big meeting coming up with the client, and he said, look, I can bring you back, and we'll match your salary, which was unbelievable. I mean, it was just like falling down and getting caught by an angel or something. He goes, the client's going to be so happy you're coming back. Because I had a really good relationship with this Fujifilm client. And I went back and everything worked out. But this sort of episode of my career where I was like, I let mythical sort of shit get in my head. I lost track of my own career management. I lost track of my own priorities and what was important to me. Working in a team that I was respected, for a client that loved me, that I really got along well with, for working for a creative director at an agency who was awesome. I mean, this guy, Tony Angotti, you can look him up. I mean, he's a legend. He's a Hall of Fame guy. And to throw that away for like, what, another $30,000, $40,000 in salary or something was absolutely the stupidest thing to do. And I think it just came from like not focusing, not paying attention to what I really wanted and what was really important to me. And like, what's a few $1,000s? And it sounds like a lot. I'm sure people listening to this think, that's a ton of money. I would have done the same thing. It's like you wouldn't, but you would have been miserable.
Yeah.
So I think that it pays to really, and I've said this in class all the time, to really think about what you want, what's important to you, short-term and long-term, and then also to manage that portfolio. Make sure that every move you make is really what's best for your book.
Mm-hmm. So not necessarily, or maybe not even the best piece, but the pieces that put you on the path to the kind of career that you want.
Mm-hmm. And what does that even mean? Does that mean you want to be a creative director? Does that mean you want your own agency? Does that mean you just want to be a senior writer, ACD for your whole career? Which I think, more and more agencies are waking up to the fact that maybe we should pay people not to become creative directors. Maybe we should keep paying them so that they can be the one doing the work all the time. Not everyone that's a good creative is cut out to be a creative director or run a piece of business or to manage. So I think that the industry is evolving that way, and I think that's important for people to be honest with themselves and figure out what's important to them in the short and long run. So I don't know. What was the question?
Advice, long and hard won advice.
Yeah, I think it's really figuring out what you want, and then reminding yourself about it, not letting opportunity or things distract you. And not to say that things can't pop up and surprise you, and you can go for it. I mean, I think if you're going for it for the right reason, yeah. But I was going for it out of sort of fear and some mythical reason to make more money. I think it was bullshit, just stupid.
Any other stories you'd like to share? I'll ask about the ideal temperament. So, just coming here, a lot of people are very like gregarious and extroverted, and have lots of like on the fly ideas, which made me think, like, is there an ideal temperament for somebody in this industry? Or is there space for everybody, for the quiet people, for the analytical people? Or are you better served somewhere else?
Oh, I think there's not. I think there are a lot of ideal temperaments. I think the number one thing is resilience. I think being able to sort of not take it personally when things are not working. You had written down a question on here that I think maybe it was part of one of the earlier questions, and that is about like people who do well in school. Is that an indicator that they're going to do well when they get out?
Right.
And people that have this sort of these sort of really industrious students who do a lot of things. It's interesting to me. I think that the ones who have that sort of gregarious maker attitude, very like sort of out there, it's like climate change and steroids. Okay, so climate change and steroids are similar in one way, and that is that severe storms aren't caused by climate change, but they increase the likelihood of it. Same way steroids for baseball players, you don't hit a home run because you have steroids, but you have a higher likelihood of hitting more home runs. Doesn't mean you're a better hitter. It means that you're just more likely. And I think it's the same thing. I think that a certain temperament is sort of more likely to succeed quicker.
Sure.
The same way climate change affects severity of storms and steroids affects home run numbers. That's not to say that someone else isn't going to get a lot of hits or isn't going to get home runs. It's just not as frequent. Unfortunately, I think that the quiet artistic type has to work at a certain way to be noticed. And I think that the goes back to your very first question or second about favoritism. It's like part of this industry, like it or not, unfortunately, is about being noticed and remembered. Mm-hmm. And I was saying this to someone recently about how there's students that I had in class last quarter or 2 quarters ago. I don't remember their names. And I had them for a whole quarter in class.
Yeah.
For 11 weeks, we sat in the same room. I looked at their work and I did their grades and I knew who they were. But if they never came into my office or never gave me a reason to remember them, I don't remember them. And that doesn't mean that they're not going to do great. That doesn't mean that shouldn't be in this business or anything like that. It's just that they're more likely for me to remember to mention to someone. They're more likely for me to like check in with than the people who don't do that. And I wish the answer were like, oh no, you can be a complete introvert and kick ass in advertising. I had a partner who was, and he's great, and it's not a problem. I just think that it's a slower go. And that's shitty. I wish that weren't the answer. That's my answer. And I'm sure people disagree with me.
No, a helpful answer that...
What the fuck are you supposed to do if you're an introvert? Like, you're supposed to now, like what? You're supposed to, like, take caffeine pills to be more interesting or something?
I mean, like, there are other ways to... there are other ways to distinguish yourself. You can be an introvert and then, I don't know, you're the one answering the questions. But it's very helpful because it's not a bullshit answer.
Well, here's another thing. I think that if you're arrogant, or you're an introvert, or you're any other thing that you think could possibly hold you back, just know it, that's possible. Just know that you are impossible to talk to because you have to be right. Just know that you seem impatient, right? You don't have to be more patient. You just have to know that pretty much everyone's sitting here thinking that you're kind of an arrogant dickhead. Everybody here is thinking
you're standoffish.
No one here hears you because you're so quiet. Just know that that's something you have going on because you might figure out a way to mitigate that.
Yeah. I love that. That is the crux of sensible advice. Yeah, there are things that are better and worse for getting ahead. Just know them. Just be aware of it.
And I could be wrong. There could be people who completely disagree with me. Seriously. There could be creative directors that are just like, no, I don't want another, like, insufferable maker in here. I've got enough makers. I need someone who I never hear from, who just churns out work all the time. And I think that's true. There is a place for everybody. I think it's just a little harder to hit a home run if you're not on steroids. That's all.
Fair enough.
I went back to the same analogy.
Yeah. No, it's a good one.
Yep.
Fair enough. Anything else here?
Yeah, I just want to say one more thing. So I want to thank you for doing this. I know you're the host of this, but I want to thank you for doing it. And I want to thank, this has been 10 years of these conversations. And I just wanted to thank all the guests that have been on this thing for 10 years and the listeners who supported this podcast, because it's been an incredible privilege for me to be able to have these conversations with just the most fascinating, generous, open-minded people. I've learned so much and I've enjoyed myself so much doing this. And I just want to thank Dave Hahn and the Creative Circus for supporting it, for the One Club for supporting the podcast on the magazine page on the One Show, Maria for the idea of doing this 10th anniversary show. And there's a lot more of these to come, but I just wanted to really express gratitude to everyone for allowing this thing to happen for as long as it has. So thank you very much. And
congratulations on 10 years.
Thank you. How can people reach you or see anything from you? Because you're the host of this.
You can reach me at mkovsky@gmail.com. And
how do you spell Kovsky?
Kovsky. Okay. So you don't have to type in all of Khodorkovsky. Happy to answer any more questions or continue the conversation.
Cool. Thank you. Listeners, I know I'm not the host when I say this. I'm at Dan's podcast at mac.com, and I'll be back in 2 weeks with another conversation. Thank you. Thanks, Maria.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Right. See ya.